Hello, and welcome to this special episode of the Wine Pair Podcast. I'm Joe, your sommelier of reasonably priced wine, and for this special episode, I am on my own, as my wine pairing partner in crime is busy making cakes for her Baby Cakes Micro Bakery, which, by the way, you can learn more about if you head over to her website, lovebabycakes.com. Today, we are on our second interview in our series on Virginia winemakers, so we can spread the word on the wonderful wine they are making in the Commonwealth of Virginia. As I mentioned in our first episode in the series with Jake Bushing, when we first started this concept, we were going to do a single episode and edit the interviews together. But as I talked to all these different winemakers, I realized that they all had very different and exciting stories to tell that you deserve to hear. So today, we have Justin Rose of Rosemont of Virginia wine to share with you. Justin's story is unique in that he came from a family with a farming background, but went to college to pursue a degree in chemical engineering before he came back again to become the winemaker at the winery his father started on the family farm. So he is able to combine the science and the agriculture pieces together with art to create Rosemont wines with his family. It's a really fun and interesting story, and we really can't wait for you to hear it. But before we get to Justin, let's do a quick orientation to what we usually do in our podcast, because many of you may be here for the first time, and we are happy to welcome you to our podcast tribe. Now, in most episodes, we learn about, taste, and review 2 to 3 wines that are reasonably priced, which means under $25 each and should be easy to find. However, for this special set of episodes, we interview people who are involved in actually making wine, because part of what we want to do with our podcast is to educate ourselves and you on different aspects of wine knowledge in a fun, entertaining, and unstuffy way, and that is what we're doing today. A small plug before we get to our interview with Justin. If you like what you're hearing or are interested in hearing more of our regular episodes, please subscribe or follow our podcast so you can hear more, especially since you're only getting one half of the Wine Pair Podcast in this episode. And you can also go to our website, thewinepairpodcast.com, to send us a note or subscribe to our newsletter. And you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at the Wine Pair Podcast. And if you like what you're hearing, we would love it if you leave us a nice 5-star rating and review. But without further ado, let's head over to our interview with Justin Rose. Hi, Justin, and welcome to the Wine Pair Podcast.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, well, thanks for joining us and being willing to share your story. We've had a lot of listeners ask us to do more on Virginia wine and Virginia winemakers. And where we sit in the left-hand corner of the United States, we don't often get a ton of Virginia wine. So this is a great opportunity to help people learn more, try and find your wines, and just understand what's great about Virginia wine. So ready to do it?
Yeah, excited to do it. That's awesome to hear. That's what we're trying to do with Virginia wine is, I think, as a group too, is to expand outside just the East Coast and get some recognition for what we're doing here and get our wine into people's hands outside of this area. So excited to talk about it today.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about your wines and Virginia wine in general, but let's start with you. Let's talk a little bit about Justin. So tell us a little bit about your family background and growing up, if wine played a role at all, and how you ended up in this place as a winemaker in Virginia.
Yeah, sure. So growing up, wine for me did not. Family did, food, community togetherness. The farm here that I'm sitting at, where the vineyard is, dates back to the 1850s when we bought it. So I'm the first generation to grow up outside the farm. My father was the first generation to leave and go to college. And he wanted to come back and do something with the family land that had been sitting dormant for about 30 years. So he had started a vineyard when I was in college. I was doing chemical engineering, so I had a chemistry background, which is sometimes what a lot of people have before getting into this industry. And I was going to take a year off and go to grad school for chemical engineering. And we had planted the vineyard my junior year of college. And I'd helped out that summer planting the first vines. And I met Lucy during that time, who's our vineyard consultant. She's been with us actually since 1999, and we planted the vineyard in 2003. So her and my father talked for 4 years about what we might want to do here. And she took me to Napa to visit a lot of her clients back in the harvest of 2005. And I spent a week with her all over Napa Valley and ended up the last 2 nights at Caldwell Vineyards at John Caldwell's place in Coombsville with Lucy. They're very close friends. And at about 1 a.m, drinking wine, kind of was convinced by them to stay at John's old schoolhouse they were fixing up and stayed a month. and just bummed around the valley, working harvests all around for free in 2005. Met Steve Krebs at Napa Valley College and decided to stay there and go to college, do basically graduate school at Napa College. Worked out there and did their program, got lucky enough to get an internship up on Howe Mountain at O'Shaughnessy, worked there, and just lived and breathed wine while I was out there and just kind of fell in love with it. And then had an amazing opportunity to come back here in 2007 and basically just kind of, my father was like, here you go, let's make some wine. We had about 22 acres of vines at that point and just kind of went at it from there. But yeah, I just kind of fell in love with wine in Napa. I mean, it's hard not to, especially with the contacts and the people that I met and hearing their stories, and then just kind of built it from there. So that's kind of my intro into it, and then go from there.
Well, I have a number of questions, follow-up questions to ask you. The first one is a little bit more background into why did your dad decide that he wanted to have a vineyard?
Yeah, like I said, he was the first generation. Him and his three brothers left the farm. They were pushed to go to college, and they did. They were all very successful in different jobs, corporate life. And unfortunately, when they were in college, my grandfather passed away. And for my dad's job, we moved around a lot. So growing up, I moved 6 times before I was 13 with his job. But here in Southside Virginia was always home. We'd always come here in the summer. Family was always very close. My parents are both from here. My constant was my family and my cousins here. And so he really wanted to get back to doing something with the farm. He's pretty open about his journey, but he has some depression issues. He's always struggled with that. And home was always a balance for him. And so he really wanted to do something and kind of reclaim the family farm. And my mom pushed him to do that. And so he did a lot of research. And again, we were lucky enough to meet Lucy through a family friend. And so over those years, him and Lucy talked about potentially a vineyard. You know, when my dad was growing up, it was dairy cattle. He would get up in the morning, they would milk cows. Before that, we were a vegetable farm. Even though we're kind of tobacco country, we were very kind of a poor family farm. So the kids would go work tobacco to make extra money. But he wanted to do something with the property. And right then, vineyards, they were around in Virginia. You were starting to see more and more. And when talking with Lucy and research and everything, they thought that we could have some success here. So one thing they did do is plant 16 different varieties when we started. So that was something that was very much Lucy's influence of, we're going to try some traditional European grapes, Merlot, Cab Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, but we're going to also try half of our vineyard on French American hybrids. And that has served us really well going forward. And we've really kind of dove into that as well, which has really helped us out.
Yeah, this story of farms switching from what they used to do into grapes, et cetera, is something that, this is not an uncommon thing across the United States. I think what's interesting, like in Washington State, we had that sort of transition growing up in the central Washington area. I went there quite a bit. It was always orchards, like apple orchard, and then suddenly sort of switched over into vineyards. And we're seeing that in different, Texas is seeing that, other states are seeing that. So that makes a lot of sense that there is this sort of attraction to maybe we try something that's like wine that's lucrative.
Right. And I think to mention too, my father went back to when he was growing up. Apparently it drove my grandfather crazy that we're very dry right here. So we sit on the north end of Lake Gaston, which is mostly in North Carolina. We're right on the border of North Carolina. So we're probably one of the most, if not the most southern vineyard in the state. And there's another lake west of us, Carr Lake. And most of the fronts in the summer that come from the west get pushed around our little site here. They call it the Bracy Bubble. And that drove my grandfather crazy for farming that he did. But my dad always had in the back of his mind, for grapes, that could be good. We're also on the highest point of the counties. We have really good airflow. Our soils, they're not overly rich, but they have great drainage too. So we found this little microclimate that we thought would work well. It wasn't just, we're going to do grapes. We looked at everything. We're like, oh, I think grapes could work here. So let's try that too. And then we went from there and again, trying new things and just, we've had successes. We've had some challenges too, but you just kind of roll with it. But yeah, I think it made sense that grapes would work here. And so that's what we kind of took a risk with.
That's great. And in a minute, I want to ask a little bit more about what grapes you think work particularly well in not just Virginia, but your area of Virginia. Because you mentioned that you're in the southernmost part. But first, I want to go back one more trip back into Napa. You kind of mentioned it, but was there a like an aha moment where you're like, okay, maybe not, because your background is engineering. You studied engineering. Yes. This is not an uncommon thing that we see. A lot of people find a transition from sciences into winemaking. That's something that a lot of people we've interviewed have said. But like, what was it? Was there an epiphany? Did the skies open up? Like, what happened?
Yeah, I enjoyed chemical engineering in college. That my brain is very much an engineering brain. But for me, it was sitting with Lucy and John Caldwell. Like I said, kind of midnight-ish that one night, that one of the last 2 nights Lucy was there in Napa with me, and hearing their stories. They were talking about John had a nursery back in the day. That's where he kind of started. Now he has his own winery, and talking about him like smuggling vines over from France, and hearing all these stories. And again, I grew up in a very family oriented, extended family with uncles and cousins and stuff, and just sitting around talking and hanging out. Again, it was more food based, not wine based. Now it is with wine, and hearing them talk about those stories and realizing from Lucy too of the potential opportunity I had with my father starting a vineyard. And then just kind of honestly, I looking back on like chemical engineering or kind of the romanticism of the vineyard and making wine and making a product that's different every year and that people are going to enjoy. And then for me, because I didn't drink a lot of wine before that, not even in college, tasting the wines and hearing them talk about it and how people were so expressive about what they were doing, it was just hard for me not to be like, okay, there's something telling you that this is the direction you need to go. And there's a lot of things telling you that. So let's do it. And so that night was where I just kind of, and that's when I decided to, like, on a whim, I'm just going to stay here a month. I'm going to stay at John's place. I'm going to just live and breathe this for a month and see if it's something that I enjoy. I had no plans. And then I came back for a couple months and then bought a Jeep and drove myself right back across country, got an apartment calling up in Napa City, and just on a whim, I'm going to go there and learn it all. So I think it's just everything was just kind of like, this is what you need to do. And I enjoyed it and just dove into it.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love it. You were called to it.
Yeah.
And I love the pull of family too. I'm sure your father and mother love the fact that you're connected to the family as well.
Yeah. And my father he's the vineyard manager. He's still at 71 is running the vineyard. Now we're trying to get someone to help him out and take his position over so he'll never retire, but he can step back a little bit. So yeah, family's still very much involved. He runs the vineyard. I obviously do all the production, help him in the vineyard and some decisions. And then my wife runs the company with her marketing background. So it's still, I think Old Rosemont will always be family. And I think that's something you see with a lot of Virginia wineries too, that then also is kind of interesting with the story of each of us.
Love that. Let's talk a little bit more about wine and grape growing, et cetera, in Virginia, because I think
Sure.
I'm learning a little bit. And what I've learned is that Cabernet Franc is a great grape to grow in the Virginia area. And I'm sure as starting a winery, there's a lot of pressure, like, hey, everybody does Cabernet. That's what everybody asks for. Like, let's do a Cabernet Sauvignon. But curious about what you think really works in your area, what really works in Virginia, what makes those wines special.
Yeah, I mean, talk about Cabernet Sauvignon. We had 3 acres of it when we started because you're going to try it. And after 8 years, it was all gone. I mean, for us here, it didn't work. You can find it in other places in Virginia, it will. I think Cab Franc works across the state. You'll see different styles too. So what we make in Southern Virginia stylistically may be a little different than what's in the Shenandoah Valley or in Charlottesville, Monticello area, Northern Virginia, or even on the Eastern Shore. So you see grapes like that work everywhere. I think Petit Manseng is potentially turning into another one that you're going to see more of. We're going to get our first Petit Manseng from our vineyard next year, which I'm excited to see what that can do. So I think you have some consistencies across the state. Chardonnay does really well around the state. We don't plant it here. We have decided to go with Chardonel, which is a hybrid of Chardonnay. It's our most planted white grape. It does fantastic here. We use it for sparkling wine, and then we do it all the way into like a stainless steel crisp white wine, and then we'll do barrel ferment on the lees for a year and a half, natural ferment, club wine only that we do too. So it's really versatile. Another grape that we love here is Chambourcin. Chambourcin's another French-American hybrid that dates back to, I think, mid-1800s, but really started to become more propagated around the East Coast and stuff in the 1960s. And what's cool about Chambourcin, it's one of the only grapes that has color in the pulp. So you don't need any skin contact to get color. So we do a lot of rosé with that, mostly a still and a bubbles with it, which have been 2 of our most produced wines, which do great for us. On our site here, Merlot does fantastic. I think the soils are conducive to it. We're right in between the coast, about 2 hours away, which have the sand, and then we're about 2 hours away from the mountains, Appalachian Mountains. So we do have some clay, but we have really good drainage. I think that's what's unique about Virginia too, is we kind of have we're in between. We have Europe to our east, and then you have California, West Coast to our west. And we're kind of, even style-wise, we're kind of in between those, I think. We can have some boldness to our wines, but they also can have some freshness as well, a little bit more acid-driven. I think ours is always about balance. And so we don't have the biggest tannin structure, but we do have wines that I think are really enjoyable, and they have balance to them. They have some expressiveness to them, some layers to them, which I think is really nice. I will say that we grow a lot of different grapes because weather's conditions can be year to year very different. And so having some flexibility with different grapes for us as a business, because we're trying to be estate grown, is important because a year could be really dry all year. So the Cab Franc does fantastic. It's the last thing we pick. Or we could have a year where by mid-September, a couple of hurricanes hit us, and the only thing left on the vine is Cab Franc, and it gets dinged up a little bit. And so it's good that we've already got our Tannat and Petit Verdot and Merlot in that can help with some of our blends if need be, if the Cab Franc's a little diluted. But yeah, I think for us, it's always trying some new grapes too. So we've talked about maybe trying some Albarino, and I think you'll see that in Virginia too. We're a little bit of a blank slate still, even though we're starting to hone in on what we do really well. Because again, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, almost now, when we planted the vineyard, it was kind of these classic grapes that you would think of. You think of Cabernet Sauvignon. These now may work, like I said, some places, but not everywhere. So now we can kind of hone in on the grapes that make the best juice and make the best wine. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think one of the things that we try and talk about is, there are so many different grapes and grape varietals and wine types. And what I really love is this focus in Virginia. And what you're doing is like, let's focus not on maybe what the most popular names are, but the grapes that are going to produce great wine. And it's interesting, like when I was looking at your Chardonnel, I'd never heard of it. Petit Massang was something that had come up in a previous interview with the Virginia winemaker. Again, not a grape that you see quite often, and at least like on the west coast of the U.S. And right. Chambourcin is another one where you don't see that very often on the west coast. But I love the idea that you're focusing on grapes that do well, that are going to make great wines in your area. Right. And I'm also curious about, do you think, because we think of wine as the fifth food group, do you think also those wines pair well with maybe some traditional cuisines from the Virginia area?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's partially why Virginia wine has done well on the East Coast in general. I think, especially with some of the whites, you think of seafood, oysters, things like that. Our sparkling wine, some of the wines that we do really well with that. Our Traminette, which is another French-American hybrid, is a hybrid of Gewürztraminer, so it's very similar in style to that. We do it on a dry Traminette. And I think that can go with a lot of different cuisine. I think, we always talk about, especially where we are, Virginia ham is really big. And our rosé Chambourcin it has a little bit of salinity to it, which goes fantastic with that. So that is like a pairing that we're always like perfect pairing. Virginia ham, our rosé is just a great pairing. So I think there is that. And then I think, again, in general, our wines are pretty fresh. They have a nice balance of acidity and tannins too. They're definitely they definitely can pair well with food, which I think is important. That's always one way I look at wine. Again, growing up more my father loves to cook. He's a foodie. My wife and I are both foodies. And wine has to go with food. I enjoy wine by itself, but I always love to have wine with food. And so our wines, that's the style of wine we're trying to make too. I'm trying to make here is wines that are expressive, that showcase our fruit. I mean, I'm not trying to put myself down on what I do in the winery, but for us, it is all vineyard. It's getting the best fruit. And then for me, expressing that fruit either through some natural fermentations or just through how I ferment the reds a little bit softer and cooler temperatures to be more expressive with the fruit, less new oak on those too, to again express what we're getting from the vineyard. So yeah, I think that to me is important to have wines that can pair with cuisine, but then also are nice enough to stand up by themselves, but definitely can pair well with food, especially some of the local cuisine that we have here.
Speaking our language, for sure. Yeah. Love that. You're starting to speak a little bit about the vineyard, the estate. And maybe this has always been the case because the farm was the family farm, but do you find that you spend more time with the juice or more time with the grapes, or is it sort of like split? Like, how do you think about that in how you're thinking about making your wines?
I'm the only one in production side. So most of the time I'm down in production. But again, considering my father is the vineyard manager, we're always talking about what's going on. And so I'll be out there looking at stuff and talking with him. But yeah, I think, when I started, especially being a chemical engineer, it was numbers. It was, these are your targets. This is what you're looking for. The rosé has to be this Brix level. You can't have a Cab Franc that's like under 13% alcohol and not freak out. Like, this is bad. What are we going to do? And now it is listening to the vineyard, what we can do, how we can push it, but then also trying to be very respectful of the vineyard, especially what we're doing in the vineyard. And that means, to me, finding grapes that can handle our challenging weather and stuff like that. So that's why I think we really like the French American hybrids here too. And honestly, a grape that's happy and growing well that you're not having to fuss with is going to make better juice. So it is a lot of observation in the vineyard. again, what's awesome about Lucy has always been the main focus of us. She introduced me to my mentor, who's I don't work with as much now, but as I started, I was 25 coming in and told to make wine, and my dad didn't drink wine. So Lucy introduced me to my mentor, who's from Margaux, France, who really helped me establish and really focus in on what we're trying to do. It was never do this. It was, what are you trying to do? What are you seeing? And then how do you want to tweak that? And so I think that's what we do in the vineyard too. My father is also a chemical engineer. We're very much focused on what has worked and what hasn't, and how you tweak and how you try to do better, but also be respectful of what you're doing. And so, yeah, it's a lot of observation in the vineyard. And then I think Virginia's been great about talking about what works and what doesn't work. And so working with Lucy and her clients, we all talk about what we're doing in the vineyard. Virginia has a great research program where we get together and we taste each other's wines and we do experiments and we're talking about what works and what doesn't work. Because again, can be a challenging region to grow grapes. And again, I don't think most of us look at we're competing against each other right now. We're competing against wines outside of Virginia. So anything we can do to work together to elevate Virginia brand is the goal right now. And so we're all working and talking about what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's been extremely important. That I think has helped us all increase the quality of our wines and then also help us, I think, broaden brand of Virginia wines outside the state.
Yeah, it's super compelling the way that you're talking about things with this combination of science, of farming. There's art aspects of how you want to put, every year is a little bit different. So how do we want to think about what we're putting together and what works and the weather? And then kind of on something else you said, what do you think is going to make, if you had a prediction, if you had a crystal ball, what do you think is the thing that will really make Virginia wine take off, or that you would love people to know about Virginia wine?
Yeah, so I think what you start to see in Virginia wines are definitely, it does help to have certain wines or varietals to help establish a region. And I think you could definitely see that with like Cab Franc. You may start to see that with like Petit Manseng on some respects. You can get some great Chardonnays. That's going to help too. But also I think what Virginia has is all of the growers can have different styles too and different varieties. And I think you're starting to see this too. I think the bigger picture of wine is not so as focused on just brands or regions. You can venture out a little bit, especially maybe with the younger generation as well. They're more open to it, but we see it across the board. And I think it's fun to try new things. And again, Virginia, there's definitely a style to it. There's a quality to it. You can try some different varieties. You're starting to see some really great bubbles come out of Virginia. So if that's what you like, you can get the bigger reds as well. You can find a style that you like here because again, we have so many different regions. It's a big state. You have weather that also can affect different things. So you're going to get different styles that you can find. I think Virginia too, again, it's a little bit of old world, new world meet each other. So you get kind of a balance of each, which I think stylistically is really nice. Again, I think the balance of the wines is fantastic. They're great food wines. So finding something that you haven't had in the past and maybe trying some different varieties or trying different wines, I think is exciting. That's one thing I've always enjoyed. And I think people that come here have enjoyed too. And I think even with Virginia, you can find something you're looking for because again, we haven't hitched our wagon to just one grape. And I think that we kind of can't in some respects because again, with the different climate challenges we have and just finding different grapes that can grow here. And again, we're a pretty broad state. So there's a lot of different regions that can have different stylistic wines that are made.
Let's talk a little bit about Rosemont wines, because I did some perusing of the website, some fantastic wines. You mentioned sparkling. Not only do you have sparkling, you have extra brut sparkling, which is like so talking our language, but you have a variety, white wines, red wines, sparkling, sweet. So I know it's hard to pick your favorite child, but what are some wines that Rosemont makes that you're just really proud of?
I'll go to sparkling real quick. That was not something I thought we would be doing in Southside Virginia. We're a little bit warmer, but again, to me, it's to listen to the fruit in the vineyard. And so I was seeing Chardonnel and Chambourcin, both the hybrids we talked about previously, early on about mid-August with these really nice numbers that would be great for sparkling, but also flavors that could work. I was like, this could be exciting to try. And so we kind of talked with our distributor, Virginia distributor that we have a good relationship with. I was like, I think I'm going to try to do 2 bubbles because I think it makes sense. I'm going to try to do a little bit more affordable. So we're going to do it in a Charmant tank to try to keep the cost down and flip them a little bit quicker. And so we did it. We did the first ones and it was kind of raw. We're like, we're just going to take it out of our racking valve on our tank. We're going to put it in the bottle. We're going to crown cap it. Brut nature, no dosage. We're going to see what we like about it. 200 cases of each. Our distributor's like, we're going to take half of it no matter what. We can do something with this. And we just loved it that way. So technically it's unfiltered. It's zero dosage, it's brut nature. It's same way and it's just, I think it's crisp, it's lovely, it's fun. It was kind of this little side project we did that now has taken off, especially the rosé one with Chamberson. And again, we want something that's fun and fresh, and I think it checks those boxes. So those I really enjoy, especially the brut rosé. We're starting to get a lot of recognition with that. We were lucky enough last year to get best rosé in an international sommelier competition with it, which I think was really exciting. And so I think especially for us with hybrids that we kind of put some focus on, that was cool. Reds are also really big for us here. Kilrock, which is our signature red, is a Bordeaux stylish blend. I mean, it's Merlot, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, maybe a splash of Tannat. We may not make that every year because of the challenges that Virginia can bring, but then we have some years like 22 and 23, which were just really great vintages, and we're making a wine that's really good now, but also can really age. That's something that's really exciting. Our first vintage in 2007 was probably the best weather we've ever had, and for me, coming from Napa, I over extracted the heck out of them, but they're still drinkable now, which is actually kind of exciting. But then you could have a really wet vintage, which they're going to be like, you drink them right now. But that's kind of what's fun, I think, and exciting about Virginia wines, is that you can see these differences. But those I think are the ones. And then on a white, Traminette has been one that has kind of taken off. Again, like I talked about earlier, I think it's a really expressive wine. It's a great food wine with spicy food and seafood. It has some lovely floral notes with some spice notes and kind of a German style feel to it. So those are the wines that kind of for us have been ones that have kind of built our brand. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the first one, which is still the one we make the most of, which is our dry rosé. I think the bubbles have kind of started to become really popular through distribution and stuff, but that dry rosé is still, we've done it the same way since year one, 2007. It's 100% Chamberson, bone dry, direct press, only taking the first 60 to 65% of the juice out of the press. So it's really crisp, has some nice salinity to it, freshness, and that's still our most produced wine that we do is our dry rosé. So those are kind of the ones that are kind of our ones that we would kind of showcase first and foremost.
Now I just want to try all your wines. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to help our listeners find out how they can discover your wines, maybe join your wine club. But one thing I did want to mention to listeners is, you've talked a lot about this. And before we started the interview, we talked about this a little bit. Just the challenges of weather in Virginia. I know this is true for a lot of places,
Sure.
But what was really interesting to me is as we record this, it's early August and you're already pulling grapes. And so, what are some of is this a common, uncommon, like how do you deal with the weather?
You have to, I learned I used to be very much engineering brain, like it has to be this way, that, this has to be this has to be this is how math, statistics, things work. And very quickly in Virginia, you have to learn that you have to roll with the punches. And then you see everything, you get kind of seasoned to dealing with it. Now, this year is a little bit different. 2025 is setting some records for us on our site, being the second hottest in 30 years and the wettest in 30 years since we really started tracking all this. But again, we've had a year like that in 18. In this case, we're going to pull some fruit on the whites earlier than normal, maybe 10 days to 2 weeks early, just because we can't push them anymore and feel comfortable about being able to produce a good wine. But at the same time, if our Traminette, like we're picking today, comes in at lower sugar levels and it's a lower ABV wine, lower alcoholic wine, we're not worried about that. It is what it is. And then it's still, I think, going to make good juice. So you just got to kind of roll with it. But I think one thing I try to do is in a year like this, it's really challenging. Look back on what we had in the past. So 22 and 23 were absolutely fantastic. Just stupid good in some respects of what some of the juice we were able to make. And 24 was really good. So you almost knew it was coming. You can't growing grapes on the East Coast. Weather's going to be a challenge. And when you're out there watching 3 inches of rain yesterday happen in an hour and a half, I try to revert back to remembering what it was in 23 when for weeks it didn't rain and it was beautifully cool nights and no dew in the morning. And so that's just is what it is. You have to kind of, as I've gotten older, is really take in the good years and be grateful for those. And then in the challenging years, you just put your head down and you just go and you just don't think too much about it, make decisions, feel comfortable with it, bring in the fruit, do the best you can, and it's all going to work out. It's fine. And then we're really lucky that, again, I think a lot of Virginia wine is sold through the story of Virginia wine. And so we're hoping to broaden that out and people to get our wines and taste them. But we've had to talk about it and tell people about our wines. And I think that's also a good thing because we can explain to them what vintages are year to year. And so we can tell them, hey, this is what happened in 25. And maybe our Cab Franc is lighter, but it's going to be kind of maybe a little bit more peppery, a little bit really more fruit forward, but drink it now. It's going to be really nice to drink now. It's not one to lay down. Or maybe we don't even do it and we just do our table wine. And we did that in 18, where we just took all the reds that we could that worked and made our table red that we do. And fine. And then in a year like 23, which was really good, we really didn't make any of our table wine. We just made all our reserves and our varietals. And so you just got to kind of roll with it. It does make it exciting too. You always have to be focused, not to say in some other regions, but like you have to always watching what's going on. You can't let it go for a minute. And I think that's kind of exciting too, is that you do have to watch it. You can take your vacations, you can do that, but when you get back, you got to make sure that you are right on it and what's going on in that vineyard and have a pulse of it.
Well, I like that nature is making an artist even out of the scientist, the mathematician.
Yeah, less science these days. It's all art, I would say, and feel and intuition. So
yeah, there you go. Okay, so let's give our listeners information about how they find Rosemont wine, how they can join your wine club, taste the delicious stuff that you make. Let us know. Yeah,
I mean, we're on Instagram, Facebook at Rosemont Vineyards, our website, Rosemont of Virginia. Rosemont Vineyards will also get you there. One thing for us, because we're in a little bit of a remote location, we're right on a lake, so that's been great. Is wine club is super important for us. That's half of our sales out of the tasting room are wine club. We do 4 wines just for club members now. Small batch. This is where we get some experimentation. So this is where we played around with our Chardonnel a year and a half in barrel, just to see that. And then we do a straight Tannat, straight Petit Verdot for club. So we can do some stuff like that. You can go on our website to join the club or order wines as well. We ship around the country. If you happen to be in Virginia, DC, North Carolina, we do distribute in there. We're trying to branch that out. I think that's one thing you start to see now with Virginia wines. There's a lot of discussions in general, and we're in those. And my wife is in those as well. We're trying to do some international distribution, or even just more around the country, just to try to run Virginia wines out. We're not going to be making, hundreds of thousands of cases of wine. I think that the weather makes that too challenging, but we can take our wines out to certain places that are excited to taste wines coming from a region that I think is really exciting and up and coming, but might be kind of unique on getting their hands on those wines. So yeah, you can find us all through those avenues.
Well, that's great. And we can't wait until you're delivering wines to Washington so we can send them all over the place. But
yeah.
Hey, Justin, thanks very much. Really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. Appreciate your time, and best of luck to you in the crazy weather that you're having. And I'm looking forward to tasting your wines. Yeah,
we're excited to get them and let you taste. And Joe, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having us. And I really appreciate you focusing on Virginia wines too. I think it's exciting for us, especially for me, to see where we've come in a little over 20 years since I've been involved, and excited to see what happens going forward.
Love it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to our interview with Justin. What a great guy and a great story. We hope you'll spend some time looking for wines from Virginia and specifically from Rosemont. And so you have it, and you can find the links in our show notes if you go to our website and look for this episode and click down and find the show notes. Here's the information on Rosemont of Virginia. The website and contact information can be found on rosemontofvirginia.com. And on Instagram, it is Rosemont Vineyards. Again, thank you very much, and we hope you'll subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky, and come back and visit us all the time on our website at thewinepairpodcast.com and wherever you get your podcasts. And you can reach out to us and sign up for a newsletter on our website. And you can also reach out to me at joe@thewinepairpodcast.com. And if you want more information, especially if you have winemakers you think we should interview, we look forward to hearing from you. But for now, it's time to go. And as we like to say, life is short, so stop drinking shitty wine. Bye-bye.